So we want to start the way we started these things in the past, very simply, is we've talked about, there's sort of four things we talk about. The first things we talk about, those high frequency indicators, the things that we're seeing new information to on a very regular basis. Second thing we talk about is just well, actually there's only three things. The second thing we talk about is some of the deeper, slower survey data and deeper data that we're getting from the federal government and from some of the survey data. And then finally, we talk about, some of those things we're going to be watching in this next week or so that might give us an indication of how things are coming about. So as per usual, the last number of weeks, there are all these big indicators, the fast data indicators we're seeing, high frequency indicators that we're seeing are getting more and more positive. And there's only one that's kind of still in the doldrums, and that's movie theaters. But interestingly, I've spoken to a few business owners, and we have some clients who are business owners who are taking money out of some accounts so that they can invest in a reopening and a relaunch. Some people are changing the way their businesses face the public. If you have a restaurant that comes in that shows up in one way. If you have a retail store, it shows up maybe in another way. Foot traffic through a store. How do people keep their distance if you have a retail store? How do people keep their distance if you have a restaurant and you want to still serve people? So people are actually taking some money and reinvesting this money into their businesses so that they can reopen and serve the public in a new way, which I think is fantastic. It's it's the process that is unraveling to make, or not unraveling, that's not the right word, that's coming together so that people can actually keep doing their work. And just as a side note, my son is 15 and a half, and in California, at 15 and a half, you get to take your DMV permit test. He got his learner's permit. So this last weekend or a couple weekends ago, we started teaching him how to drive. And I thought this was going to be really difficult, but he's catching on. He's actually a really safe driver, which I'm happy to see. I put him into a couple sketchy situations and he's managed it really, really well. And anyways, while we're driving around, we're seeing a lot of these things opening up. We're seeing small businesses opening up, and we're seeing things that we haven't seen in the past, which is a good indicator that things are opening. So what are those six high frequency indicators? They are TSA checkpoints, gross movie ticket sales. Again, that's the one that's not really launching off the ground. They're working on figuring out a way to safely open movie theaters with fewer attendees and probably a lower concessions vending system, but opening nonetheless. They're trying to figure that out. Hotel occupancy is up. Gas consumption is up. Apple's mobility data is up. The one lagging section is that public transit, that's still lagging. I think that makes a lot of sense. But all of these high frequency indicators, less movie theaters, is positive, and it's slow and steady positive. Scott, I don't know if you have any comment on that, on some of those kind of, high frequency things you're seeing. I know you attended an event last weekend. I wonder if you wanted to just comment on that.
So Friday night, we know somebody that has a restaurant down in San Mateo, and they had outside dining on the golf course, separated by 6 feet plus. Pretty crowded. I wouldn't say like standing room only, but definitely had reservations to be there. People were pretty excited. And then they sort of had a component where it was like a drive-in. So you sort of drove your car into the parking lot, and they had a big screen, and they were showing the Peanut Butter Falcon, I believe was the name of the movie. And I think just people really are ready to try and take on some kind of form of normal. And we were not able to do that in San Francisco at that point when we went down there. That started this weekend. I have a friend in the movie business, and they're waiting. They're going to find out at his company. They're going to find out in the next, I guess, couple of weeks. The PPP runs out, and are they furloughing people, or are they actually getting contracts and are able to extend the work that they're doing? So I think that's that among other industries like leisure and travel and cruising, I think is an industry that's still got a lot of work to do, which is, I think, fairly obvious to most people.
Yeah, no doubt.
So, yeah, I just wanted to add that, we're in Alameda County, but Berkeley is right next door to Contra Costa County. And on June 2nd, Contra Costa County opened up retail. So you could actually go into a retail store. And, I went over to the El Cerrito Plaza. There's a line out the door to get into Ross. People were coming out with bags. I mean, I stood there and watched for about 15 minutes. I don't know, if half their clients or customers are coming back or what, but people were going in there and coming out with packages, bags full of stuff. And here in Berkeley, we may open up on Friday for retail.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I think ultimately we're all going to open back up. And then the other thing we're seeing that goes along with this is we're seeing a spike in some infections. And I think that those two things go hand in hand, and we'll have this argument. We'll continue having this argument about should we be opening up or should we not be opening up? How should we open up? How can we be safe? And every single individual is always going to be making the decision about how engaged they want to be. Do I want to go personally into a retail store right now? I don't see any reason to do it. The thing I want to do is I actually do, and this is kind of crazy. I do want to sit in a restaurant. I do want to have that.
Say again? I don't think that's crazy at all. I think you're not alone.
Yeah, of course.
People sit in a restaurant. They're ready.
I miss the din. I just miss the noise and the interaction and the people, and I just miss it a lot.
Yeah.
So this last week, a couple other things. We sort of went over the high frequency data points. This last week, there were some other data points that came out that were interesting. Usually it takes the National Bureau of Economic Research, a lot longer, but they've called the end of the expansion in February. The March decline was so severe and so fast that they have said that the recession has begun. Now it's going to be a long, long time before they call an end to the recession. It's going to be long after the recession actually ends. And now, I kind of believe that the recession, and what I mean by that is the actual declining of GDP. The actual decline of GDP is probably going to end in the second quarter. Maybe it extends to the third quarter, but it probably ends in the second quarter. Given that things are opening up from a near total stall, it doesn't take big numbers to see an increase in the third quarter. And it doesn't take big numbers to see an increase in the fourth quarter and the first quarter of next year. That being said, the National Bureau of Economic Research, they're not going to call an end to the recession until we get close to our February high point. And so that, the total recovery of all the lost productive capacity isn't going to be there until late 2021 or early 2022, long after we have a vaccine, long after we see the recession actually end. We're not going to see a complete recovery. All the while, though, starting with the third quarter, GDP is going to slowly increase and unemployment will eventually even more slowly begin to decline. And this is, we talked about unprecedented for the last number of weeks. This process of recovery is the normal process. And we're going to have to fend with new infections and sort of rotating potential closures. But the process will be slowed down. It won't be stopped. A couple other specific bits of data, other specific things like industrial production is off 16%, but expectations are that we'll see industrial production actually increase in May. Unemployment is off about 12.8, but this is up from April's 14.5. So it's off horribly. It's off a little less than it was, though there's some questions around this. You can, if you dig into this data, you find out there's all kinds of questions about the data itself because, maybe the reason it's down is because the participation rates are down. People are saying, hey, we've given up on finding a job. So we no longer are counted in the unemployment data if we're not trying to find new jobs. Another thing that happened this last week that was probably the biggest cause, is hard to attribute, but probably one of the biggest causes of the decline in the last 4 or 5 days in markets was the Fed actually came out and said they're totally committed to zero until 2023. In fact, Powell's words were something like, we're not even thinking about raising rates. And I don't know if John or Scott, if you saw those words or if you heard those words, what did that give you in terms of a sense of things?
Well, I don't know if John has anything to add to that, but I know that people have been refinancing their mortgages like crazy, and there are a couple of people that are still in the process of doing it. And what it says is, if the mortgage lender is telling you you got to lock here because you're never going to see these rates again, I actually think that may be aggressive. I think we're going to be here lower for longer on the rate side. I think Powell made it very crystal clear to anyone who was listening, not touching them for that many years. I mean, you don't go back on something like that 6 to 12 months later, unless the world so rapidly changes. And there's no reason to make a statement like that unless it's so crystal clear to him that we're going to be here. And if you remember, after 2008, we didn't raise rates for almost a decade. So it's not so out of left field for him to say something like that, with the vision he has and the data points he's utilizing. So I think rates are going to be lower for longer, just like you said. I think there's still opportunity for a lot of people to refinance and to be patient if you're not comfortable and you want less.
Well, not only to refinance, but to buy. And again, I can tell you the local story. Sherry had a house on the market last week on California Street in Berkeley. 22 offers.
Wow.
22 offers.
Wow.
And it went way over. And so that means there are 21 other people out there now that are going to be on the hunt.
Wow.
Okay, for the next one.
John, is that because there's nothing on the market to bid on? I mean, how do you explain that?
Well, inventory is low. The house that she had was, in a very nice section of California Street in Berkeley. Yeah, I mean, there are some houses out there that aren't that great, and they're not moving. They're not getting offers. So there's that side to it too. And those 21 people that didn't get this house, they're not going to probably consider those less desirable houses. They're going to wait for another one. So, but yes, inventory is a little bit on the low side right now. So, but it's a great time if someone is thinking of making a move, downsizing or leaving the area. This is a great time. It's strong. It's strong.
Yeah.
For the right property.
I mean, that's kind of always the case, right? I mean, right? Yeah. Does Sherry have a lot of listings?
Well, now it's yes. And as a matter of fact, I went with her over the weekend. She's got something coming up on Sacramento Street near the BART station. She's got another one coming up on Delaware. She's got another guy, I can't remember what street he's on. So yeah, in the pipeline, there's 3 that I can think of right off the top of my bat. Right to the top of my head.
Yeah. I think we got that.
So it's crazy.
I want to just tell the story, and if anyone that's listening, and we do record these and we put them up on our website. So I've worked with the same realtor in the Bay Area for 20 years. And this is about 10 years ago. I had a conversation with Sherry, John's wife, Sherry Madden. And I said, hey, what do you think about this? And she was just so honest and so direct and so great. If I ever were to change real estate agents, internally in my own family household, if I were to move inside Berkeley, I would definitely look at Sherry. So folks out there that are thinking about buying or selling a house, talk to Sherry Madden. She's fantastic. There's some things we're expecting this month or this week, and I want to just kind of go through so that folks know the kinds of things that we're looking at. And this week, a whole bunch of information is going to be shared. Retail sales are going to be shared for the last month. Home builder confidence is going to be shared this month or this next week. Housing starts. We're going to see information on new housing starts. We're going to see information on mortgage purchase applications, and we're going to see May's monthly unemployment numbers. So for last month, we're going to see that number finally today or this week. We're going to see the Philly Fed manufacturing survey, and Fed Governor or Fed Chairman Powell is going to be doing his, and there's going to be a lot of interest in this. I think he's going to be doing his semi-annual monetary policy report to Congress on Wednesday and Thursday, bright and early in the morning on the West Coast. So you can see that probably televised. My bet is he's going to be pushing for additional fiscal support from Congress. You know, those folks who understand how this works is there's two different really major governmental methods of supporting the economy. The first is monetary policy. That's what the Fed governor or the Fed governors manage, what Chairman Powell does. The other side is what Congress can do and the president can sign on for. And that's the fiscal side. That's the spending. That's the money we saw in the PPP and the CARES Act. That's the money that we talk about doing sort of a Green New Deal. That's that money. And I think Chairman Powell has already come out and said we need more spending from the federal government. I think we're going to see that again when he does his monetary policy report to Congress this Wednesday and Thursday. And then on Friday, I think very importantly, he's going to be leading a virtual discussion on building a more resilient workforce in the time of COVID-19. And he's going to be doing that at the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland, where one of my favorite longtime clients works as a sort of a human development specialist. So I think we'll be very interested to see his comments on that resilient workforce, and we're going to be very interested to see his comments on Wednesday and Thursday about what Congress can do to support the recovery of the U.S. economy coming out of this lockdown event. Any thoughts on I want to just open it up to John and Scott to comment on those. We expect a lot of information this week, and we'll be talking about this again in a couple weeks here. But I want to make sure that if you guys have any comments on these kinds of things, you have a chance to talk about these. And then we don't have any questions. So if anyone wants to pop in a question, just even as a test of the system to make sure it's working, I would really appreciate that.
I think, as Jonathan was mentioning, there's a lot of good information coming to us, and the data helps us get a baseline as to the progress, because this is really what we're measuring now is progress towards normal, and how long that might take in various sectors and countries and regions. One thing I thought was interesting, I think France and Germany and a bunch of the EU are now allowing travel amongst countries. There's a couple of those big countries that have announced that. That's this week. That's now. Actually, I think France is allowing people eating in restaurants and bars. So if you remember, we got all this after those guys did. And so they look like they're a little bit ahead of schedule as far as us getting to where they're at. I think one of the questions I'm hearing, I don't know if there's anything in the chat box there. One of the ones that I'm hearing from clients is there's a real concern that there's going to be a huge spike in these cases. And then, not that the world's coming to an end. I think people figured out that's probably not what's going to happen. They have a hunch that's not what's going to happen. But there's a real concern. How bad does this get? And what does this do to the marketplace? And I think that's one of the biggest questions I've been getting, Jonathan, from folks. And I even had somebody say over the weekend, I think it could be worse than what had happened, which I'm having a hard time myself buying into that narrative. But there's people that believe that and think that. So I think it's worth talking about.
Yeah.
It's worth talking about.
I think it's interesting because I'm not thinking about the big global numbers, just thinking about our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so 2 weeks ago, for the first time, my brother and my nephews met us at the park, and Eli it was just Eli and I the first time, but the last 2 times it's been Eli and Annie and myself, and the 6 of us are out there. We're just kicking the ball around. Asher is my youngest nephew. He's a little bit younger than Annie, and they would go off and they were building birds' nests, out of stuff they found, and having fun. The 4 of us, the older boys, and my brother and I were juggling a soccer ball and taking shots, and so that we've now connected with, and I touched the same soccer ball that my brother touched in San Ramon. Now, the day before, this is on Sunday mornings, the day before, Evan, my older nephew, decides to, he's playing soccer with, 4 or 5 of his friends. And so he's connecting with those people. And I'm imagining those people are connecting with other people. And when you think about this, even though our circles of contact are small, they're still there. And there will be lower infection than the first go round, but we are beginning to, because it's human and we need contact, we need to communicate with people. We're beginning to do so. And that whole process is going to unfold all over the place. And I think that's one of the reasons we're seeing an increase in infections. Like Scott said, I don't see that increase coming the way the first round did. A whole bunch of people have already had it. B, we are actually, even though not perfectly, we are socially distancing. We are wearing masks.
That's that second thing you just said, I think is the big one, which is part of the debate I had this weekend with this person whose last name happens to rhyme with mine, but that's another story. So, when we were talking about this and he was sort of trying to get this narrative that things could get much, much worse than we ever were, right? I tried to explain to him that in the beginning, because we forget, I think as humans, we have very short-term memories in a lot of departments. We forget in the beginning, there was no distancing, there was no masks, right, at all. And so there was no protections whatsoever. And now there's distancing, there's masks, there's things that not everyone's doing it, but a lot of people are. And so to expect it to be as bad as it was in the very beginning, and they didn't even tell us, I guess it was 6 feet, then they were telling us 12 feet. In the very beginning, I felt uber safe because they said it's old people that are 80, 90 years old. And then they changed that now. So there was really, in the beginning, not a lot of good information relative to what we have today. So to think we're going to go get a whole lot worse than what once happened, I think that would really be going against like what makes sense. But I don't work for the World Health Organization or the CDC, and we just don't know. But I think it's unlikely.
Yeah,
I think it's unlikely.
And I think that the thing that we're going to respond to, we're going to see a lot of, is we're going to see places that are going to be very bad.
Spikes.
And those places are going to be largely where people ignore the best advice. Right. And I think that those places will be long-term spotty. I think there's going to be lots and lots and lots of them. And as we hear about more of those places, fewer of those places will exist in the future. Like we learn from our mistakes. Most of us. Those of us that don't, I don't know. That's, how can we help? We can't. I actually don't feel right about forcing everyone to stay home because it hurts some people a lot more than others, and it's actually socially and psychologically a lot more damaging to people, not just financially. I mean, financially is true as well.
Or
just
abuse, depression.
Right.
All that stuff.
All those things of, we're seeing suicides going up, we're seeing all that kind of stuff happening. And that's horrific to me. And if there's a way to kind of get in between there, which is what we're doing, we're opening up slowly in some places, more quickly than others. We're learning lessons as we do it. And that's really all we can do is learn those lessons.
It wouldn't be a bad idea. We don't have a huge crowd. We have a few people. One of the things we're talking about as a team is when do we actually experiment with a social distance gathering? Is it in September and we have our ice cream social and everyone's separate? Is it at some kind of social distance dinner outside and then like a drive-in movie for some clients? And we're just tossing ideas around. And what we don't know really, we're sort of talking about it pretty recently, is what you guys think, right? And we'd be curious, those are on the call or anyone that works with us, what, guys, that's just a deal breaker. I'm not interested. It's too soon, or, I'm ready for something, just make sure it's outside. And so we're just really in the process of trying to figure out how do we get back to some version of normal, right? We only have had one client really aggressively want to come in and see us. And that's not going to happen because it's not generally safe to do something like that right now. But for the most part, it's been a unified, clients are not in the spirit of coming in right now. And we feel like it's not the right call either, but it's a two-way street. And we certainly would love to hear what you guys think about that.
In fact, I think we'll I'd love to get people's comments here in like the chat box. Yeah, but
this would be a good start because we're thinking of doing the survey, aren't we?
Yeah, I think we're going to
get a survey out.
Yep, we're going to get a survey out to people via, what is it, SurveyMonkey? So we're going to send out a survey out to people to talk about, hey, we're thinking about doing something. What would you be willing to do? And we're going to continue doing some of these things that are like this through Zoom and some social things through Zoom. We're going to continue doing that, but we want to get a pulse of how you feel, how our clients feel about, because I actually miss the social interaction. I miss a lot of that, and there's a lot of information that gets passed between our clients and us when we meet in a group atmosphere. And I think it's a good thing to. I'm not chomping at the bit to do it again, because I'm just as nervous about everyone else about getting sick. But at the same time, if we can be social distance, we can wear our masks. There's protocols for this, so we can follow the protocols. And we're in about 30 minutes, just about. And if there are no questions, and I haven't seen any popped in here, John, is there anything you're hearing from folks that you think we ought to touch on that we haven't touched on?
Well, as Scott said, I have fielded and referred people, with regards to the refi. At least half a dozen clients have reached out. I think 3 actually have done it. It's signed, sealed, and delivered. So that, like Scott mentioned, that was big. The refi was a big deal.
Yeah, one of the questions on the interview this morning was, what is your, and everyone here knows this because we've heard us talk about it a lot. What is the advice for people to do in this kind of a time? What are the things you can actually do to move the needle, that will move the needle? And anytime you can reduce your structural expenses by refinancing a mortgage and going from 4% to 2.5 or 3, I mean, you do that. And if we see 1.5, you'll see me refinancing. We got about.
But yeah, on your conventional, well, not conventional, but let's say $1.5 million house, 20 or 30% down. Make sure the credit scores and everything work out. 30-year fixed. It's going to be probably 3.25 to 3.5 right now.
Yeah.
%.
Yeah. So I think we're going to, one of the things John and Scott and I have to come up with is a way to drag questions out of you. Because I see you there.
So who wants to do the ice cream social in the middle of September up in Tilden Park?
Yeah, I'd love to.
The most amount of questions asked, just planting a seed. Most amount of questions asked on any given Q&A on a Monday gets a gift card somewhere, right?
Or graders delivered to their house.
Something, right? Just something.
Yeah, good idea.
How to get a little character on.
So I think next time we're gonna build in some polls into this call, so that we're gonna ask you a few questions that you can actually respond to with checking a button, some multiple choice polls to see who's paying attention to other things out there. But that I think that's it for today. Unless Scott, you or John have anything else to add to the process, I don't see questions coming in. I really appreciate everyone coming out. We are going to continue doing this every couple of weeks because I don't know what's coming, and I want to be there if something comes and you guys actually have big questions that are burning. We'll continue to report back to you what we're seeing. We'll continue talking about those high frequency data points, updates on the markets and economies, and hopefully using this as a way to seed your faith in the future, your belief in the long-term planning process that we have in place. So thanks everyone for attending, and we will see you in a couple weeks here, and hopefully this Friday next Friday at one of our client events. Thanks everybody. Thanks Scott. Thanks John.
Thanks guys.
Thank you.